If you have a strange experience, a real encounter, or a story you can't explain, send it to us.
All right, let's go. It was the red-eye bus, the one that leaves late so you can sleep through the trip and wake up at your destination. We were on Highway 191, dropping down from Moab toward Monticello, but we'd passed the town a long time ago. We were in the dead stretch, that piece of asphalt that cuts through the high desert, where the only things out there are sagebrush, red rocks, and a darkness so heavy it feels physical. Must have been around 2:45 in the morning. Most people were asleep. The sea had that hypnotic hum, you know? And then, bam, it wasn't just a flat. It was like a cannon shot right under our seats. The bus swerved violently to the left, almost crossing into the oncoming lane. Not that anyone was coming, the road was deserted, and then the driver wrestled it over to the right shoulder. The smell of burnt rubber flooded the cabin instantly, that acrid chemical smell. When we stopped, the silence was what scared me first. The engine died. The overhead lights flickered and settled into that dim emergency glow. Outside? Nothing. Just the wind hissing against the windows. The driver, an older guy named Earl, told everyone to stay calm, said it was the rear right tire and he needed to get out and assess it. He grabbed a heavy flashlight and stepped out. We sat there for about 20 minutes, cooking in the residual heat of the bus with no AC. People started getting restless. There were about 15 passengers. A group of 3 college students behind me, an elderly couple in the front, a woman with a baby who, thank God, was sleeping soundly, and a few solo travelers like me. The heat got unbearable. Someone popped the emergency exit or forced the front door. I didn't see which, but the cold high desert air rushed in, and with it the urge to stretch our legs. "Don't wander off from the vehicle," the driver shouted from the back, where he was struggling with the hydraulic jack. But you know how people are. First, it was one of the college guys. He wanted a smoke. Then the old couple got out to get some air. I stepped out right after them. The sky. My God. The Utah sky at night is beautiful and terrifying. So many stars you feel crushed by them. But if you looked at the horizon, at the brush, it was absolute pitch black. Earl's flashlight cast long, distorted shadows on the rocks beside the road. That's when I noticed where we had stopped. There were no signs, but about 30 yards from the road, where the sagebrush got dense, there were shapes. Small mounds of stacked stones. They weren't natural. They were cairns, markers, and further back, barely lit by the moon, was what looked like the remains of a rotted wooden fence, almost disintegrated. "Hey, look at that." The guy smoking pointed with his cigarette. "Looks like one of those pioneer graveyards. Or maybe older." His friend laughed. "Indian burial ground, man. We're in the middle of nowhere." They laughed. I didn't. The air there smelled different. It didn't smell like dry dirt and sage like the rest of the state. It smelled like copper and overturned earth. Like when you dig a deep hole in the backyard after the rain, only it hadn't rained in months. The tire was stuck. Earl was cursing, banging on it with a lug wrench. That's when the girl in the group, the girlfriend of one of the guys, said she needed to pee. "I'm just gonna go behind that big rock." "Don't go far, Sarah," her boyfriend said. We watched her phone flashlight bobbing as she moved away from the shoulder, entering the brush, passing the stone mounds. The light got smaller and smaller. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her boyfriend, a guy named Mike, shouted, "Sarah? Come on, the driver's almost done." No answer, just the wind. The wind had shifted, now blowing from the brush toward us. And it carried a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper, but not a quiet one. It felt like someone was whispering right into my ear, while standing 100 meters away. A clicking sound. Stones tapping together in a slow rhythm. Tech, tech, tech. "Sarah?" Mike stepped into the brush. The other friend followed. I stayed on the shoulder with the elderly couple. The old man held his wife's arm. "I don't like this," he said. "This isn't sacred ground. It's rejected ground." Suddenly Mike's flashlight, 50 meters ahead in the darkness, started moving erratically. Up, down, sweeping the ground in frantic strokes. "Sarah, Sarah, this isn't funny." Then we heard her voice, or what sounded like her voice. It came from the left, much farther than she could have walked. "Mike, here, cold." The voice was flat, emotionless, like a bad recording playing on an old tape. Mike and the friend ran toward it. I watched their phone lights disappear into the thick vegetation. That's when the driver, Earl, stood up. He had managed to change the tire. He was sweaty and pale. He looked at the brush, then at us. "Everyone inside. Now." His voice wasn't authoritative, it was terrified. "But the boys," the old woman began. "I said now," Earl yelled, dropping the lug wrench to the ground. He didn't even pick up the warning triangle. Then we heard the scream. It wasn't Sarah. It was Mike. A sharp sound that broke halfway through, as if the air had been ripped out of his lungs in one violent pull. Then, the sound of something heavy being dragged across dry dirt and gravel. Scratch, scratch, and the worst part, the laughter. Not human laughter. It sounded like hyenas or coyotes, but articulating words. It was coming from every side now. From the stone mounds. From the rotted fence. I ran for the bus. The old couple came right behind me, stumbling. Earl jumped into the driver's seat and started turning the key. The engine sputtered. "Open the door. They're out there." I yelled at Earl. "They ain't out there anymore, son," Earl said, staring into the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide, fixed on the darkness behind the bus. I looked out the back window. Mike and his friend's phone lights were still on. They were on the ground, facing up. But around the lights, there were legs. Too many legs. Pale way too long. With more joints than a human leg should have. They moved around the lights in absolute silence. The creatures, if I can even call them that, were tall, thin as rails, and moved with a fluidity that made me nauseous just looking at it. They had no faces, just a smooth surface where eyes should be. And then, one of them bent down and picked up the phone. The light illuminated what should have been a face. And I swear on everything holy, the thing smiled. But it was a smile ripped vertically into the skin. "Go! Get us out of here!" The old man bellowed. The engine caught. Earl stomped on the gas. The bus peeled out on the gravel and jumped back onto the asphalt. As we gained speed, I kept looking back. The phone lights didn't stay put. They started following us. Floating in the darkness, bobbing at a speed no human could run. They kept pace with us for almost a mile, running parallel to the bus out in the desert. They only stopped when the lights of Blanding appeared on the horizon, miles ahead. When we got to the gas station in Blanding, there were 11 passengers. 4 were left behind. Sarah, Mike, his friend, and a man who had gotten off to smoke on the other side. I didn't even see him disappear. No one did. He was just erased from existence. The police, the Utah Highway Patrol, scoured that area for a week. They used drones, dogs, volunteers on foot. You know what they found? The flat tire Earl left there, the lug wrench, and the phones. The 3 cell phones were stacked perfectly on top of each other, sitting on top of one of those stone cairns in the graveyard. No prints, no damage, full batteries. But the bodies? Not a drop of blood, not a scrap of torn clothing, nothing. It's like the desert opened its mouth, swallowed them, and closed up again without leaving a scar. The official report says disappearance under suspicious circumstances and possible wild animal attack or disorientation followed by hypothermia. Hypothermia? In 10 minutes? I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. Last night, I was at home here in Salt Lake. My phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. There was just static. And in the background, way in the background, Mike's voice. He wasn't asking for help. He was whispering, "The tire went flat again. I am never setting foot on that road again."
If you have a strange experience, a real encounter, or a story you can't explain, send it to us.
I'm only saying this because I can't carry it anymore. I've tried to forget it, ignore it, bury it, but it never left me. It just stayed there, in the back of my mind, like a weight I couldn't shake off. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I need to finally say what happened. Exactly the way it happened. I used to drive the night shift of the 403N line. It ran from 1 in the morning to 5. Industrial zones, abandoned warehouses, old residential blocks. Places where the city looks half asleep and half dead. Nobody wanted the shift, so they paid extra. I didn't take it for the thrill. I took it because I needed the money. Pure and simple. My first night, I arrived at the bus yard around midnight. The place was dark, quiet. A single security guard smoking in the rain. A few sodium lights buzzing over the parking stalls. The night shift supervisor, a thin man with deep eye bags, handed me the keys to bus 77 and said only, "Glove compartment." No explanation. Nothing else. Just that. The bus was parked at the far end of the yard. All the lights inside were off. I climbed in, sat at the driver's seat, and opened the glove compartment expecting registration documents. Instead, I found a small gray spiral-bound booklet. No title on the cover. Inside, typed on old yellowing paper, was Night Shift Manual, Line 403N. I thought it was some kind of outdated employee guide. But when I flipped the page, I found a list of rules, none of which made sense. 1. Never allow boarding after Pedrera stop. 2. If a passenger asks whether you've passed Old Terminal, say no, even if you already have. 3. Do not stop for anyone waving between 2:14 and 2:23 a.m. 4. If all passengers fall silent at the same time, do not call anyone by name. 5. If the internal display shows a destination you don't recognize, do not change it. Just continue driving. The remaining rules were smeared, like someone had dragged a hand across the ink. I laughed. Some old prank on the newbies, I thought. Closed the booklet, tossed it back into the compartment, and started the shift. The first nights were almost normal. Almost. 1 or 2 workers heading home from late shifts. A nurse. A factory guy. A drunk. Nothing new. But here and there, tiny things didn't add up. Small fractures in the night. One shift, a well-dressed older man boarded, suit, hat, polished shoes, and paid with a banknote I hadn't seen in years. An old series, wrong color, wrong texture. The validator accepted it. But when I checked the cash box at the end of the night, the note was gone. Another time, a woman boarded at Pedrera stop at 2:17 exactly. Her uniform was damp though it wasn't raining. She sat silently near the front, staring out the window but not following the passing buildings with her eyes. She just stared at some faraway fixed point. At the final stop, her seat was empty. No ding of the bell, no opening of the doors, no footsteps. Just gone. A supermarket badge with her name lay on the floor. The next day, it too had vanished. 3 weeks in, curiosity got the better of me. During break, in the driver's lounge, I casually asked, "So, does every new guy get that creepy little manual in the glove compartment, or is it just me?" Silence. Instant, heavy silence. One driver pretended he didn't hear. Another forced a small laugh. The supervisor changed the subject immediately. That silence made the manual feel less like a joke and more like a warning. One night off, I had an excuse to check the yard's CCTV feed. I asked the young security guy if he could pull footage from the corridor where my bus was usually parked. Between 9 p.m. and midnight, everything looked normal. Cleaners, mechanics, buses being repositioned, routine stuff. But between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m., every camera that faced the lane where my bus was parked turned into a gray, staticky blur. Not black. Not offline. Just noise. The timestamp froze. No motion. Then at exactly 11 hours and 1 second, everything snapped back to normal. I asked if that happened often. The guard shrugged. Old system. Only that corridor. Only that hour. Then he quickly changed the subject. I started checking the manual before each shift. It wasn't the same. Not once. Rules appeared and disappeared. Numbers jumped around. Sometimes there were 6 rules. Sometimes 11. Sometimes scribbles in the margins, like someone had written in a hurry. One night it read, 3. Do not stop at technical school, even if the signal rings. 4. If someone boards without a shadow, do not charge them. 5. Do not respond if someone calls your name from the back after midnight. Technical school was always empty. Always. Yet that night, I saw a thin woman standing exactly under the sign, hair dripping even though the pavement was dry. I drove right past her. In the side mirror, she was still standing, but facing the wrong direction, like she was staring into nothing. The strangeness escalated slowly. Manageable things. Things I could rationalize. A passenger I'd watched get off reappearing later sitting 2 rows back. A child asleep on her mother's lap opening her eyes in the reflection of the rear mirror, but shutting them when I turned. A man tapping his foot at the exact same rhythm every time he boarded, at different stops, different nights. Some nights, the streets themselves felt stretched. The 3-minute segment between Old Terminal and the viaduct sometimes took 6. The clock didn't change. Just my sense of distance. Like the world's geometry had slipped when I wasn't looking. Then came the Tuesday night. The night that ruined me. It had been raining since dusk. Thin, persistent rain. When I opened the glove compartment, the manual was swollen with moisture. The cover slightly warped. On the first page, beneath the title, someone had scribbled with a blue pen. Do not ignore tonight. Not my handwriting. Not anyone's handwriting I recognized. Inside, new rules were written in the margins, squeezed between old ones. 2. If it rains, do not use the wipers at maximum speed. 3. Do not look directly at the group at KM14 after 3 a.m. 4. If all passengers stand at once before the final stop, continue driving. 5. Do not return to the yard with the vehicle empty. I felt a tremor in my hands. A fear I didn't want to admit. But I kept going. Money is stronger than superstition. The first few trips were quiet. Rain keeps people home. Just the janitor, a backpack kid, an old man sleeping against the window. But the faces started repeating. The man in the gray hoodie showed up on 2 different trips, paying with the same bored expression, sitting in the same seat, tapping his foot in the same rhythm. The woman with the purple coat, who I had dropped off 2 trips earlier, stood motionless under technical school stop as I passed by. Her wet coat clung to her body. She didn't raise a hand. Just watched the bus move past her. By 2:30, the internal display flickered. Changed by itself. 403N, Old Terminal, blinked and shifted into return. I reset it manually. It changed back. When I glanced at the manual lying open, a new rule had appeared. 14. When the panel shows return, you are not heading back. I drove on, pulse rising. Close to 310, approaching KM14, I saw a group waiting at the stop. 6 or 7 people. Ordinary clothes. Ordinary posture. Too ordinary. They were perfectly still. No shifting weight, no phones, no conversation. Just standing in the rain, heads angled toward the direction of the incoming bus. I remembered Rule 6. I didn't look directly at them. I opened the door using peripheral vision only. I heard them board soft, wet footfalls, and felt the bus tilt slightly with their weight. None spoke. None moved. As the bus pulled away, I noticed the engine sounded heavier. Labored. Off balance. Then, through the mirror, I saw them all at once. The entire group, rigid in their seats, staring straight ahead. Not blinking. Not shifting. As the rain patterned down the windows, their faces seemed unnervingly smooth, like their expressions had been sanded down. At a long, empty stretch of road, I noticed pedestrians walking along the shoulder. One of them was the man in the gray hoodie. Then again, further up. Same posture. Same footfall. Same face. At 3:27, the passengers stood. All of them. Simultaneously. Legs straight. Back straight. Heads forward. Rule 9 rang inside my skull. I didn't stop. I kept driving. Then I took a shortcut, the forbidden return ramp that reconnected to the expressway leading toward the district where the yard was. I don't know why I thought it would help. Maybe instinct. Maybe desperation. As soon as the bus tilted onto that ramp, the interior lights flickered violently. The air thickened. A low hum rolled under the floor. And then the impossible happened. I didn't see exactly when they moved. I only realized it when I caught a glimpse in the mirror. Every passenger was suddenly right there near the cabin, far too close, as if they had slid forward without using their legs. Then, as I turned the bus onto the forbidden ramp, the air shifted, like the whole vehicle dipped into a different temperature. The lights flickered once, twice, and when they stabilized, the corridor behind me was empty. Not empty as in clean. Empty as in wrong. The space felt stretched, deeper than it should be. There were no footsteps, no breathing, no weight on the floor. But the air carried a residue of presence, as if they had been there 1 second earlier, and then simply failed to exist in this version of the bus. It felt like the instant I left the approved route, the interior slipped somewhere the passengers couldn't follow. As if the bus and I crossed into a place where they had never been at all. As if I was now driving the same vehicle, but not the same reality. A few seconds later, the road ahead changed. The signs repeated. The guardrail looked doubled. The asphalt seemed to ripple with rain that didn't match the sky. And then I saw the stop. A lone shelter. A flickering lamp. And a crowd, 15, maybe 20 people, standing perfectly still under the awning. Some I recognized from earlier trips. Some from earlier nights. Some from years I couldn't place. No umbrellas. No dripping. Just waiting. The stop bell rang. No one inside the bus had pressed it. I slowed down. Not out of choice, out of reflex. The way you slow down when you see potential passengers. The doors resisted opening. Then, with a cracking sigh of pneumatics, they gave way a few inches. And hands, cold, pale, rigid, forced the doors wider. They boarded silently, one after another. Their clothing soaked, but leaving no wet footprints. One tall man paused beside me. His eyes were too deep, the whites too large. "Will this bus return?" he asked. I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry. My hands shook. He walked back without waiting for my response. What followed was a blur of instinct and terror. I tried to take the ramp toward the yard. The display switched to return again. The bus grew heavier. The engine groaned. And then they were outside. Dozens of them. Standing on the road. Blocking the way. Rain soaking their faces, their clothes. Not moving. Not blinking. I didn't break. Not because I was brave, but because every survival instinct screamed at me that if I stopped the bus, I would never leave it again. The impacts were muffled. Bodies against metal. Cold faces sliding across the windshield. A web of cracks spread across the glass. Then the windshield gave way, collapsing inward. Hands reached through the opening, grasping blindly, searching. One caught my shoulder with unnatural strength. It felt like grabbing ice. I floored the accelerator. The bus lurched. Something dragged beneath us, More hands clawed the air. No screams. No blood. Just pressure, weight, and the grinding sound of something not meant to be under the wheels. I don't know how long I drove like that. Time folded. Space twisted. When I looked up, I was turning onto the yard's access road. The gate was open. The security guard waved like always. I pulled in. Parked. Shut off the engine. My hands peeled away from the wheel like they were glued. And the bus was fine. No broken glass. No cracks. No dents. No water on the floor. No passengers. Nothing. The yard's cameras showed no record of my return. Like I hadn't arrived at all. The next day, the manual was gone from the glove compartment. I quit the day after. Years went by. I got a different job, a different life. But one afternoon, while waiting at a government office, I saw an old newspaper framed on the wall. A local tragedy. A bus accident from 1994. 403N. Same line. Same route. Same section of road where my display kept showing return. The article mentioned that all passengers died on impact. But there was a detail that froze me in place. Victims could not be identified. No personal documents recovered. Just like the passengers who vanished from my bus. I still don't know what happened. And I don't want to. But if you ever drive or ride a bus after midnight, and you find a gray spiral booklet in the glove compartment, with rules that make no sense, follow them. Even if you don't understand. Especially if you don't understand. Because I didn't. And I've never slept well since.